So welcome to the NOFA Winter Conference. And I'm gonna go over my slides if I can. So as you know, like it was inhabitants here before colonization. So the Nipmuc tribe is the people still storing their traditional lands, and it's one of the biggest tribes in Massachusetts. They go all the way from like New Hampshire down to almost Connecticut. So if you ever get to wonder, the name of the tribe in this parts of the world is the Nipmuc tribe, and it's a very fancy map, interactive map that you can put your zip code, and is the native land.com, and you can put any zip code and you can get more information what native people are in that area. And I just want you to know that we're trying to center racial equity in this conference. So we are recognizing that the agricultural system is built on stolen land and the forced labor and exploitation of stolen Black and Indigenous and other people of color. So we just want, you know, folks to know that we're trying to center those folks because they haven't had the access they needed to succeed in specifically farming. Sorry, more technology. And we're gonna have at lunch BIPOC caucus. So folks of color are gonna caucus and talk about how the experience in the conferences and let us know what is good and what is bad. And then also at the same time in the lunch is gonna be a couple tables talking white allies if you wanna talk about how you can more further this work. And thank you for our sponsors. That's the only reason we're able to do this stuff, free lunch and all the other stuff. Obviously, people that pay for the conference help other things to happen, but most of the stuff is paid by our sponsors. And so you can go in where you registered and all the sponsors are there with tables. So please come by and say hi and thank you for their support. And if you haven't done yet, check the QR codes. Is here is one outside, and you can definitely do bidding in the rally up, and that just helps us to have more accessible conference in the future. And I don't think I have anything else for you. So thank you for tech support. And I think this is you. So do you want to introduce our? No. So I have a little reading for you.
Okay.
No, he just want to read your bio.
All right. So this is Lincoln. He's been farming for 15 years. Most of those with draft horses. He wants to know if it is possible to produce food without destroying the earth. If the answer is no, if it's not, then he's going to finance it. He's going into finance.
Thank you, Lincoln.
Thank you.
So you're gonna be kind of in the camera,
Yeah, where should I be?
but no, you can be whatever.
Is that me right there?
That's you.
Yeah, up here.
You see yourself?
I do. So if I'm looking like that, people can see me?
Yeah, you look at the camera. You
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
I'm gonna sit with him for a minute.
But the further you are from the microphone,
No, it's a very good mic. They can hear you and me. Have a good session.
Thank you. Great. So yeah, this is more about scalable no-till and less about Sawyer Farm. So my normal land acknowledgement is not actually one of these slides, but I will start by saying we're in the hills where we are. It's kind of, there's two river valleys, right? There's the Connecticut River Valley and there's the Hudson River Valley. And so where we are is kind of the border between historical Nipmuc and Pocumtuck land and Mohican land, just because no one in their right mind would have been growing crops in the hills where we are. And so the river valleys would have been sort of like the cultural centers, and there would have been some seasonal stuff happening up where we are, but we're significantly colder. So Yeah, let's do the next slide. I started with this. That's not me. That's not my rye. I don't do rolled rye really anymore, but I feel like that's what people think about when they think about scalable, organic, no-till, Rodale style rolled rye. I just wanted to start by telling you about terms here, because I think no-till sort of now has come to stand for a lot of stuff. It sort of means regenerative. It means a bunch of things. To my mind, when we're talking about organic and no-till or regenerative or whatever these things are, that all these mushy terms, we're really asking a really basic question, which is, can we produce food in a way that doesn't destroy the earth and restore earth cycles and biodiversity? Like, is there a way to do this thing? There's 8 billion people now. Is there actually a way to produce food for those people that also keeps the earth cycles going, by which I mean like carbon cycle, nutrient cycling, water cycling, and biodiversity, which is obviously being destroyed? Can we actually maintain that while we grow food? And I genuinely feel like the jury's out. But I think it's the most interesting question I know of, and I spend a lot of time thinking about it. When I say scalable, I think the question is, can we do it within our current food production system, which includes Midwestern farms that are at 5,000 acres and includes small farms like us in this room? I think there's some answers to this question, which is like, sure, if we go back to a world where most people are subsistence farming, then there's a really different set of answers to this question about how we might work with the earth to produce food. I don't see that happening on a time scale that's super relevant right now without like mass starvation. So like, we're just going to take for granted that like an increasing number of people live in urban areas and need to be fed from land that they do not live on. And we're going to have a system that looks something like the kind of production system, at least scale-wise, that we currently have. So anybody can take issue with what that system looks like, but I think we sort of have to work with what we have if we want to keep feeding people who are being born every day. Organic, like, I don't even mean it sort of strictly when I'm talking about organic no-till. I'm not talking about it so much on the level of certification. I'm more talking about it like, if we're going to produce food in a way that restores earth cycles and maintains its biodiversity, it's probably not going to be, chemicals probably aren't going to be a huge part of that solution. But I am not knocking, and we'll get there, I'm not knocking conventional no-till. I think in a lot of ways, like, organic farmers today are faced with a really weird question, which is, when we started, we all felt like we were doing the right thing. We were like, we weren't using chemicals, but we were doing so cool. And now, with increasing understanding of soil biology and what soil health really is, and the problems that are associated with tillage, all of us, like older organic people now, are kind of feeling embarrassed because we thought we were doing the best possible thing, and like, maybe we're not, but it's really hard to marry these two things, no-till and organic. And so I think there's a fair amount to be said for some of these really scaled no-till operations, although they're super herbicide dependent. It's a little bit, at the moment, I think the kind of like world of all this is like, sort of pick your poison. Do you want to till and till and till and till and till because you have to kill weeds because you're not going to use herbicides because you're organic? Or do you want to use herbicides and leave your soil alone? I'm not going to provide the answer to that question. And then I think no-till has come to stand in for regenerative and all these things. But to my mind, like, the reason we're talking about it is there's no-till, there's reduced till, there's all, there's min-till. But really, I think this acknowledges the fact that there's been a huge growth in understanding of soil health over the last, few decades, but really as far as like hitting me as a farmer in the last 10 years, and even less, like in the last like 5 years, being like, oh wow, this is, I've always been aware of like the microbial community and all that, but really thinking about what tillage does to that community and what we now know about soil health. So that's the reason that we're talking about organic no-till. Anybody have anything to add or any questions about this piece?
How do you define subsistence farming?
Good question. How do you define subsistence? I'm going to turn it right around. How do you define it?
Well, it means there seems like there's something lacking, but then I think, is it, do you mean in terms of going back to very small farms?
Good question. Yeah, I guess what I would say is that like 20 years ago when I was getting interested in agriculture, I really felt like the answer was gonna involve lots of small farms popping up and really feeding people in cities and elsewhere, but like really, you know, a sort of like system of really small farmers and food production in that sense. I totally think there's a role for that. I increasingly, I guess, through my research, am feeling like that's really important, and we're not going to be moving away from fairly massive food production anytime soon. That's sort of the answer.
Sure. Now, at least I understand what.
Right.
a little bit.
Yeah. Should I move on? Let's see what I have on the next slide. I don't even remember. Oh, there we go. Okay, so again, before the conversation like really begins, is separate, like talking about terms a little bit more. So I think a lot of times we talk about techniques as if they are the goal, but actually goals and techniques are really separate, right? So when we say no-till, like that's not goal is like not tilling. The goal is soil health, right? So it's like, there's all these techniques that we can do, but to my mind, there's really just two goals that need to be like top of mind in terms of changing our system. There should be a third goal there, which is a lot of people want to improve soil health for the functioning of their own farm, which I think is valuable. But when I'm talking about scalable no-till, I'm really thinking like on a systems level, like what matters is our farm's contribution actually to climate or to food production or to like what do we have to offer to the world, not like what do we need in our soil to make money next year. But they're certainly related. So I think the goals to my mind are these two things, which is restoring Earth's carbon balance and restoring biodiversity. I'll just say, in terms of Earth's carbon balance, fun fact. This is the excess CO2 in the atmosphere since the onset of the Industrial Revolution, right? We've gone from like, what, 280 ppm to 420 ppm. So that difference, a third of that carbon came from the soil. 2/3 came from burning fossil fuels. We talk about that all the time. A third of the excess carbon that's in the atmosphere should be in the soil. So farms have a huge role to play in taking that CO2 and putting it back where it belongs. And not only are we removing it from the atmosphere, but we're building soil carbon and increasing soil biodiversity when we do that. So I think that was a major shift for me in the way that I started like rethinking this thing. It's it's our job is to just like take that pool and try to put it in the place that the world wants it to be in. And in terms of biodiversity, 80% of species on the endangered list are the primary threat to their existence is agriculture. A lot of that's happening globally, so a lot of that has to do with rainforest deforestation, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that we create these really simplified, skeletonized ecosystems on farms that don't support biodiversity. I mean, this is what people are talking about when they talk about pollinator habitat and all that. Thinking really deeply about like how we create a complex ecosystem on our farm that supports biodiversity. And so the ways we can get there are the things that often we conflate with, like we conflate the technique with the goal. So the point of tillage reduction is to keep more carbon in your soil and to have more biodiversity in your soil. The reason to reduce inputs is because they generally have a very large carbon footprint. Chemicals tend to destroy biodiversity and also have a large carbon footprint. We talk about emissions and reducing emissions for obvious reasons. Increasing cover, like all the living groups in the ground, 365 days a year, blah, 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 all that stuff is just about doing these two things. It's about increasing soil organic matter and increasing biodiversity. Let's move on. Unless actually let me stop. Any questions there? Or thoughts? Ultimately, this is just turning into a discussion, guys, just so you know. This is not like, if I had these answers, I wouldn't be rich, but I would be
Not here.
I don't know. What would I? I don't even know. I had like a very successful YouTube channel. I think that's like the most successful you can get as a farmer, right? You have like little sponsors, just like ads. All right, so what's out there? I think like I would love if somebody wanted to add to this list. There's not that much out there for scaled organic no-till options. I've heard a few people refer to it as the holy grail. Yeah, I mean, it's sad. If we knew what to do, we'd all be doing it. And we don't. So for me, this started with crimp rye. I found out what Rodale was doing when I was starting to look into all this stuff. That one's like really out there. There's a lot of information. There's this conventional no-till, which is 99.9% of no-till that actually exists in the US and globally. There's perennial grains, which I think is so cool. Kernza, which is developed at the Land Institute, which is basically you're breeding annual production wheat back to some perennialized wheat. And Kernza is in production. I think last year is the first year Patagonia is kind of like sponsoring a line of Kernza products. This is really cool. The yields are not the same as, you know, production wheat, but it's perennial. It's not like fully perennial. It's like 3-4 years of production. That's pretty good. That's reducing tillage by a lot. There's alley cropping, which is really cool. There's a lot of information out there about it. I'm not aware of really anybody doing it at any scale. And part of the problem there is it involves like real perennial crops that are hard to experiment with. You know, if you're committed to driving around in your field, making passes with the tractor, and now you're going to throw something in the middle of that field, or every 100 feet you're going to have a row, and that crop is going to come into production in 10 years. You're like crossing your fingers that it works in between. So I love the concept, and I also haven't seen a lot of this happening at scale. There's multi-cropping and relay cropping, which are not really the same, but I included them because it's sort of the same concept of having a couple things growing at once. There's some really cool stuff happening with this, especially in like arid regions where you don't have as much of a harvest timing issue. So you might do like chickpeas and lentils and a small grain, and you can time it better so they actually all get combined at one time. That's very cool. There's living mulches, which is what I've been playing with and what I'm going to talk about. And then most importantly is the stuff we haven't thought of yet. If I knew what it was, it would be on this list. But yeah, I'll pause now in case somebody wants to add something that I can nerd out on over the next few weeks and do research if there's something that you guys feel like should be on this list that I've missed.
Do you think there's hope for like creating more of a permaculture system with like utilizing humiculture or stuff like that on a mass scale?
I don't want to say no because that sounds like really pessimistic. Maybe. I can't even begin to wrap my head around like what that would look like on scale, I guess. And again, like I think I might have said this before you walked in, but I think there's a huge role for having stuff like that happen on small farms and scaling that in the sense that there are multiple small farms doing it. One of my kind of definitions of scalable on here was like working within our current food production system. So assuming that the near future and feeding people in the near future continues to require farms that are at 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 acres, or at 200 acres. And what you need to do to make that work is you still need a person in a giant tractor planting and harvesting a lot of food at one time without hand labor, basically. So, I mean, I'm into all that stuff. We do some of that stuff on my farm. And if I think about how to scale it, my mind kind of goes blank. I've played with them. I don't really get into it in this talk, I don't think. I'll be talking about it in my next session, which is the last session of the day. Where's that mulch come from? So in my experience, I have almost a 10-to-1 ratio of mulch to vegetable land, right? So 10 acres of mulch will grow me an acre of vegetables. It has to be moved to that spot. If that's difficult to mechanize, and then planting into that is really difficult to mechanize. Jeremy Barker Plotkin is going to be talking about that also at the end of the day. So now you have to choose. Jeremy will be more optimistic about the scalability of deep mulch systems than I will. So if you want to feel good about it, listen here. Yeah. I just was listening. If you guys want to look up Tony Enns at Scotch Hill Farm, is somebody who is in Wisconsin, and it's not scale, but it's as close as I've heard to that. Let's keep going. This is what we've tried on our farm. Well, I do have a little opportunity to talk about it. I apologize. This is not my normal talk, so I literally don't know what slides will come next. We've tried crimp rye to begin with. These two were in red because they just didn't work for us. Crimp rye and winter killed cocktails. Crimp rye for us, where we are, rye has not reached anthesis. It's not ready to roll until the first or second week of June. And we've missed our planting window for a lot of stuff then. And like I said, the first or second week of June. So I got transplants in the greenhouse that are ready to go out, and either they should go out like now, or they're not ready, or they're flopping over because I wanted them out, but it's colder spring than I thought. There's also the issue for me of that rye needs to be established to get a good stand where I am by early September at the latest. So now I have to have a crop that's out. I have to till a bunch to get the rye established. And that's at the worst time of year for me now, because I'm having all these, I assume we all are, these hurricane events are coming up. Like I used to have, I worried most about erosion in the spring. Now I worry about it most in the fall, as you get these tail ends of hurricanes, you get like 2 inches, in a couple hours. So I really don't want rye that's that big when that's happening. And I ended up feeling like, yeah, I'm just kind of moving tillage from here to there and dealing with like, does it get established nicely? Is there enough biomass when I go crimp it? Are there weeds coming up through it? When exactly am I going to be able to roll it? There was just enough pieces there that made it feel like I was like contorting myself to like try to make a system work. It was just like really complicated. And often my like winter planning would just get like kicked out the window in June for reasons of like seasonal variability. Winter killed cocktails, similar deal. A lot of that was like OP stuff. I tried to make it like clean, so I wasn't gonna have so many weeds the next season. That sometimes worked, sometimes didn't. I also did a lot with like daikon. All these annual cover cropping things ended up just feeling like there was just like, I'm trying to remember my joke line. Annual cover crops, perennial headache, which is like, yeah, there's just a lot that can go wrong. There's a lot of planning. Let's see. Oh yeah, my idea here was to sort of refer back to these. So I think crimp rye helps restore the carbon balance and restore biodiversity, and it's scalable, not that practical. Winter killed cocktails, restoring the carbon balance, restoring biodiversity, scalable, not that practical. Transferred mulch, the way that we did it to be really cheap about how we started with it, we would take a field, mow it like you're making hay, windrow it like you're making hay. You windrow your windrows. So now you're like 5 feet wide, 2 or 3 feet tall. And we would plow a bed next to it and then kick that. This is just a side delivery rake and an old sickle bar. It's like stuff, it's like $800 worth. You kick that onto your permanent mulch bed for your bed that you just plowed. And that becomes a permanent mulch bed. And you renew the mulch by just continuing to mow and rake onto it. It was like, it seemed kind of slick, and I was really into it. And there's great things about that system. Not a good use of land though. So I ended up getting rid of it everywhere except for my like slopiest slopes and my wettiest wet areas. So Carbon balance is great, biodiversity is great. I have almost no pest pressure in this system because I have native grasses and forbs growing right next to my crops. So like I don't need grow cover anymore. And that's cool. I do not think that it's scalable. Somebody with nice soil is never going to be like, I don't know what your soil is like. You'd have to take, no, I mean, by which I mean not like in a high state of health, but like, or we'll take like a Hadley soil, you know, a Hadley loam. Maybe it's not in great shape, but you could theoretically grow crops from corner to corner, right? You could tell somebody who's doing that to be like, why don't you take that 100 acres and turn it into 10 acres of vegetables and 90 acres of mulch? It's like, no, I'm going to do that. It's not scalable. And it's very difficult to transplant into in any kind of mechanized fashion. It's also a nightmare to direct seed into because you have to like move the stuff aside. I love it, but I also, you know, I'm at 9% soil organic matter in that transfer bullet system now after only like 4 years. Tarp bed system, similar to the transferred mulch system, but because I was frustrated how much space I was losing on some of my nicer ground, I started using these 6-foot wide woven ground cloth. Why does that sound weird to me right now? Woven ground cloth. What it's called, right? It's weed cloth. Weed cloth, yeah, it's breathable. It's like a fabric-y thing. It lasts forever. I've had some sheets for like 10 years. We lay them out like there's like a double bed. One of them has holes in it every 18 inches you can plant into, and the other one's solid. So they're pinned in the middle and sandbagged on the sides. So they flip, you can like flip it back and forth. So you have a few options. You can use the solid one to just kill weeds or pasture, whatever grasses are coming in. You can use one to plant through the holes. You can also roll back the solid sheet and direct seed into it. So we just eliminated the labor of like rolling these things up and putting them in the shed and remembering which one goes to which bed and where they just like live in the field now. So it's low labor compared to other tarping systems. I don't know if it restores the carbon balance because it's plastic. It doesn't seem like a great option to me. Biodiversity is nice because I do have these like nice perennial pasture lanes in between my double beds. God forbid it's scalable because the last thing we need is like thousands of acres of woven ground cloth all over the Earth's surface. It's also not scalable because you can't really transplant into those holes. You could probably work it out if you'd have to time your transplanter exactly, and then you could like actually make it into those 18-inch holes, but it's not, I would not say it's scalable in that sense. It's pretty practical. So all that led me to be like, okay, these things are cool. I've played with all this stuff. I don't really know how we're gonna like move forward though. Another important thing for me to say is just where we are and what we grow is mostly fairly low value storage crops. We're not close to, I live in a town with like 800 people. And so a lot of what we do is like cabbage, carrots, onions, things that I really can't afford to pay somebody to like fuss with because I'm gonna end up wholesaling a lot of stuff for like $1 a pound. So again, just kind of, I think that's probably what moved us towards this idea of scalability and reducing labor. Like, how can you produce these things in a way that, you know, also just feels bad to turn around and be like, this cabbage is $3 a pound now because I couldn't figure out how to grow it efficiently. And I'm just going to tell you about how great it is that the system I have is so great and pass that like cost on to the consumer. I understand there's the other side of that argument, which people should be willing to pay more for good food and blah, blah, blah. I just think the obligation kind of runs both ways, which is, are you doing everything you can to be smart about efficiency so that you can afford not to charge people more than they need to be charged for good food? So that led us to this perennial clover living mulch system. Let's see what the next slide is. That's right. Yeah, that works. Yeah. So for years, like, I believe I first read about it in like the New Organic Grower 15 or more years ago, probably now, where he's just going through and like broadcasting clover into a standing cash crop, right? So this is, we grow some field corn for cornmeal and masa that we sell in the farm store. But, so this corn would have been like all bare and tilled, weeded multiple times. And then when we would hit last cultivation, this picture is probably from the horse days. So you're on this like straddle row cultivator. There's a horse and a horse here and a horse here, and you're like on this machine sort of straddling. It's very similar to a tractor, just in the sense that like at some point the thing is too tall and you knock it over. So last cultivation we go through, and we broadcast clover heavy rates, like a pound per 1,000 square feet, which is like 44 pounds an acre. Broadcast that in, not incorporate or anything. Clover seed's tiny, wants to be at the surface. And that comes up. So this picture is probably October. So we would have broadcast in here in July. So now you're looking at, it's dried down. It's got to be still a little green up top. Late September, early October would be my guess. And you have this beautiful cover. We started moving towards this in every cash crop that would accept it, which is most, because then you don't have a tillage event to get your cover crop established post-harvest, which for us was usually rye, which is really annoying to deal with in spring. And if you're not quick enough, you're just not going to get that much rye growth in the fall. And so it's not doing a lot of work for you over the winter. So I ended up really loving this system. This is our go-to cover cropping method. And I highly recommend it. Forget the perennial living mulch, like ignore everything else I say. There's one thing you take away, you're like, maybe I'll play with Dutch white clover as a cover crop. I love it. You can disc this in spring, 2 diskings and it's gone. It's really mellow, so it's easy to kill. The soil's mellow underneath it. You get a little bit of nitrogen, not too much. If it's gonna overwinter, you're gonna disc it in March. You're not like, it's not a huge end credit there, but it's something. Great pollinator habitat, and it's low growing, so you don't have to think about crop competition. So on the one extreme would be like corn. We would probably put it in the first week of July, undersow it the first week of July. Onions, we would undersow it the last week of July. That's just because onions are winky and they really can't play well with any kind of competition. And then now picture you just have your other crops kind of like in between. So all solanaceous stuff, cucurbits, all squashes, beans, brassicas. So the only thing we don't use this on would be storage carrots, storage beets, just because if you don't get this clover in, for me, by the first week of August, so assuming most people here are a little bit warmer, second week of August, it's not going to reliably overwinter. You really want to get that in sometime in July so that you get it overwintering, and also you just get that full canopy for a few months, so you just have the benefit of it. That window for us doesn't work for storage carrots and beets. They still need to be weeded at that time, and you basically kill the clover when you go yank out a full bed of like root vegetables. Same thing, I couldn't put it on potatoes because potatoes don't come out in time, and salad greens, no surprise, not a good system for salad greens. All right. So, and there's 2 other ways to get this established. You can sow it with spring or summer cover crops. So if you have a fallow spot, it can go in there. If you, like we often would use oats and peas following maybe the first stuff that comes out, whatever our early plantings were, early carrots, early beets, early greens. That would come out, then we put in oats and peas, and I'd usually drill that and then go broadcast the clover on top, because I don't have a clover box or a grass box on my cedar. And the last thing that works beautiful is overseeding into rye. If you're not going to plow it down, obviously it takes a little while to get going, but if that's going to be like a fallow year or mostly a fallow year, that's a really nice opportunity to get the clover going. Clover and rye seem to really love each other. Cool. So that's what we were doing. That was our cover cropping strategy for a long time. Questions there?
What was the downfall first?
there's no downfall with it. I love it.
Is there a reason you chose white clover over red clover?
Yes. Thank you. Should have started there. Dutch, not only is it white clover, it's Dutch white clover. So most of the white clovers that you'll see that are being sold are grazing style clovers that have been developed for forage production and are gonna be much taller, more aggressive, like Alice and Rivendell, and I don't know, there's a million of them now. Dutch white is what you see in your yard or you see in like a overgrazed pasture, really low growing, stands up to traffic very well, and it's fact that it's low growing means it's not competitive with your crop. And it's not gonna like, you can harvest bush green beans out of a stand of Dutch white clover. You would literally not be able to find them in any other clover. They'd just be down in there somewhere. You have no idea. So the Dutch white is critical to this system. Now, like corn, you could talk, it's standard to undersow medium red clover in corn, because you don't care if that red clover is up here, the ear, that you're about to harvest is well above that height anyway. But I like this because you get that diversity. You have a 50-pound bag of Dutch white seed, and it's gonna go everywhere, and you're not like being clever and like this bed gets this, and this bed gets this. You're like, it's good, we're done. It's good enough. And so like you're not getting as much biomass production or as much end fixation as you would with another taller type of clover, but it's easy. We need to make this easy so we actually do it. You know what I mean? Just to think of all the like fussing that I've done. And it's like, all right, when I arrived here, I was like, great, let's do one thing. I could send somebody out. We just keep clover. In July, I just have a 50-pound bag of clover in my truck. I have the chest seeder in my truck, and I have a 50-pound bag of cracked corn in my truck, and we do 1 part clover to 3 parts cracked corn, so you can like see it as you're broadcasting it. If it's just clover, you can't really see what your coverage is. If it's cracked corn, you know where you're going, if that makes sense. So I have a jar that has 1 pound that holds 1 pound of clover. I just pre-weighed that. That gets mixed with 3 parts cracked corn, and I know that's what I want to put down on a bed. You can just easily do that math. Whatever 1,000 square feet is, you want about 1 pound on that 1,000 square feet, and you want 3 times as much chicken feed or cracked corn or whatever, something.
What happens to the corn? That's not your cash crop, right? That's just.
The corn's my cash crop.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's hardly a cash crop. I grow this for my family because we eat a lot of tortillas. But we do harvest this, and I have a little like electric sheller and a pretty nice grinder. So we sell cornmeal mostly, but we also sell these little like make your own tortilla kits. But yes, now picture like, I don't know, maybe my next picture. Let's see what the next picture is. Maybe it's gonna be onions. Nope. Point being, on many, many, many crops. I'm happy to talk more about undersowing. I do think that's like basically step 1 of everything I'm about to talk about. It's maybe the best place to get. But here's where it started feeling crazy. You get your clover established in July. It's growing beautiful, looks awesome in August, September, October, and now it's spring and you disc it in. For us, often it's too muddy. We can't actually get in until May. And now you're tilling, and then it's July again, and you broadcast it. And you're like, I'm trying to make this stuff like live, and I'm trying to make it die, and I'm trying to make it live, and I'm trying to make it die. And it was like, is there a way to just keep this clover in place? Like, is that possible? I start pushing my clover window earlier and earlier and being like, it seems like Dutch white clover and crops play pretty well together. So like, do I even need to be killing it? That was kind of like the question in the back of my head. And then I'm online in those rabbit holes. And like, there's some stuff on like permaculture forums, but not really. And you start looking around, like there's like all this university research, like going way back to like the 70s, some of it, looking at growing cash crops in living mulches. And mostly they're like, it doesn't work. And mostly they're growing like vetch or like medium red clover or whatever. And you're like, anybody who is not getting paid through a grant and is actually trying to produce food off the bat would be like, that's obviously not going to work. Most cover crops are just going to like destroy your crop. They just are by nature way more vigorous than our crops. That's what makes them cover crops, right? We don't grow like broccoli as a cover crop because it's not very good at growing. So like I started to hone in on this Dutch white clover because some of those results were like, yeah, this can be good. And then I ended up calling some of those professors and having some really good conversations about how this might go. And at the same time, be like, why isn't anybody trying? I can't find, very skeptical, like within myself, being like, all right, well, there's people doing research on this, but I cannot find a single commercial farmer using this system, which either means it doesn't work, or I've come to the conclusion that it actually means that like university research is so divorced from like the real world that at no point were any of them like, what would it take? What research should we be doing to get farmers on board? Like, should we do on-farm trials so that we can like get this idea of it? And it's just this like really, I'm not knocking it. There's been a lot of great work done, but it makes me like as a commercial farmer looking for these solutions. I'm like, share this information with us somehow, you know? Anyway. All right, so this is what it looks like in year 2. This is that same, here's the corn stubble here. So that's that same picture. The corn's dead and gone. This was still horses, I think. I probably came through with like a sickle bar mower and took it down. Sometimes we actually park. So much freaking information. And I find this stuff very exciting. So this is that same picture. The corn's gone, the clover's come back and looks beautiful. So this is year 2 clover.
What month?
We're probably in late May here. I start grazing animals on May 15th normally. And so if this is looking good, it's probably around that time of year. It's you know, similar growth to pasture where you're like, kind of looks like May where I am in April, often in early May. And then it's like,
So you plant year 2 corn in there, or you rest it?
we're about to look, we're about to see that. I wouldn't plant corn because I just had corn there. But we're about to start planting into this. So this is year 2 clover. Next slide, please. Here's how we plant into it. We mow the clover. We have a drum mower now, which is a hay mower. It's a European brand. It's an Ibex. Just mow with whatever you want. You can mow with a lawnmower. But this drum mower is like a 6-foot, I guess, offset mower, and it just does a good job getting it down to like 1.5 inches, 2 inches. And the drum mower is just, it's got a lot more power behind it than your regular hay mower. It's just, you kind of can't break it. And this is not a hay field. Like this is a field in which like people will leave their sweatshirt and their water bottle. And I have like old ground staples and there's rocks and whatever. So you don't need to bring your like lovely mower out into this. And brush hog doesn't work so great. It's just hard to get a consistent height on brush hogs, not finished mowers, not what's meant for. We now use this no-till transplanter. I have a grant for a no-till planter, like corn planter. And then we're gonna go back and mow 2 weeks, we'll mow again 2 weeks after transplanting. And then we mow after that again to control clover competition or to control weeds that eventually come up through this cover. Let's go to the next slide, just to show you a bunch of pictures now. So this is delicata squash. This is what's crazy about the system. When you first try it, you're like, this is not going to work. That is a 128 delicata right there. And this like little furrow you're seeing is from my transplanter running through. So we transplanted that on 6/2. Next slide, please. Where's the squash? There it is. there's one, there's one. That's 618. There's almost no growth, but it's green. Next slide. Now we've mowed to do some weed controls. It looks like, is there a way to like X that box? Oh, sweet. Awesome. Thank you. It's over a month old now, but like that's decent growth. It's about to start vining. And yeah, we've just, with a lawnmower now, we only go in with the tractor once for transplanting. After that, I don't have a way to mow in between these rows. Next slide.
It's not working.
There you go, 722. So there's this real explosion that happens in July, basically. And I think it's about like, there's this very slow shift between like your crop gets the upper hand over the clover eventually. And part of that is just naturally the crops we're putting in here are more vigorous than the clover. But the other thing that's really important dynamically that's happening in here is the warmer it gets, the less vigorous the clover is. It just is what it does. It's going to flower early and start to like move into a kind of quieter, it's not senescent, but it's like, it's not a super vigorous time of year for it, where it's kind of optimal for most of our crops. So like you start heading into like the heat here and you're going to start seeing this like real explosion. Next slide, please. Oh, those rows totally grew together, but here we are looking at, you have some nice delicata here. I don't have any problems with squash rotting in this system, which is usually the next question I get. Next slide, please. Here's cabbage on 616. That's what the transplanter looks like from the back. Is that a video? Could be. No, it's not. It's not. It's not. That's all right. Next slide. It looks kind of beat up afterwards. I only bought one transplanting unit because I didn't know if it was going to work, and it does. I have plenty to say about the transplanter. It's good enough, but so I have to drive one way. It's offset, 10 inches off center of my transplanter. So I drive one way down this bed, then I turn around and come back the other way. So when I get 2 units, it'll be half as much like wheel traffic running through here. So each one of these has been driven over 4 times by the time I'm done with my single unit thing. So it's kind of looks kind of junky. That's 616. Next slide, please. But it pops right back. And so now we're 2 weeks later, and the clover's looking pretty good. Next slide. Oh wait, go back 1 sec. Sorry. There's drip tape on these rows. So we do drip. Generally, there's only one line. Oh, there it is. Sometimes we move it back and forth. Usually there's just one line. This season was obviously horrific moisture-wise, but you can get away with. They don't need a lot of water, but they need some. Next slide. There we go. It's looking good. Keep going. It's just sort of time lapse. So we got 30,000 pounds an acre with just 90 pounds of N. On this one, I did a few experiments, and this is storage number 4, and 98% marketable. So I mean, 30,000 isn't like, I'm not breaking any records, but it is equivalent to, you know, a tilled situation. Next slide. Broccoli worked great. Brassicas love clover. Next. Tomatoes this is my first year messing with tomatoes, just because I think last year was a really wet year, it was like 2021, and they just drowned in the clover in the section that I was experimenting in. It was just like actually ponded for a week. So tomatoes did well. They came into production later, either because of clover competition, or my personal theory is that the clover is shading the soil. You have cooler soil temperatures, you're going to get later production on a lot of your like super heat loving things. Next. This was like, I could not believe they did this well. But we had beautiful direct seeded beans. So I ran through actually with the transplanter because I don't have a no-till planter yet. And I just like walked behind in that little strip with an earthway. Seeded the beans. When the beans started to emerge, we mowed right over the top of them to take the clover back down, and they did great. This is what it looks like. I like this picture because this is like post cabbage harvest. There's just not a time now that this field isn't 100% covered and doesn't have living roots through the entire thing. So I'm like, when I see that, I'm like, that's very hard for me to achieve otherwise. Like a post-harvest situation is that lovely. All right, so the upsides are there is still tillage because eventually I get perennial weeds moving into this system. That's actually the issue now. It's weeds I never would have seen before, which is just like timothy. There's even like a little bit of daisies or whatever perennial stuff comes in. So eventually it needs to be plowed down and you have to hit reset. You're fixing CNN through the whole growing season. You have living root 365 days a year. Organic matter's up. Biodiversity's up. Biodiversity is cool. I've been having like farm helpers, like just being like an assignment will be like you have to sit down in a tilled field or like one of our tilled sections. You just sit down and spend 10 minutes like staring at the ground, like right next to you, you know? And it's just so freaking boring. It's crazy. And then you're like, all right, now spend 10 minutes in clover. And initially, it's also kind of boring. You know, you're like, looking at it. But like, you can't, there are insects everywhere. There's a difference between like heights in the canopy and on your crop. Like, it's interesting because it's a living ecosystem. And I feel like you could almost like not have any of this data. Who gives a shit about any of it? I feel like if it's like compelling on like a level of you can just feel that you're in like the functioning world. It's the difference between like walking on a sidewalk and walking in the woods. You're like, oh, this is a living place. This is complicated. There's like all these insects, I don't even know what they are. There's a spider. There's there's just like a richness to it that makes me happy. And then there's these labor and fuel savings. So there's this whole like little, each chunk is only getting 3 tractor passes on it. There's the pre-mow, the transplant, and the post-harvest brush hog. So there's fuel savings, emissions savings there. That's compared to, my organic tilled things. I don't even, like, I can't even necessarily count passes on 2 hands by the time I'm done. And that's like, some of that's my fault. For sure. But some of it's like, yeah, you plow, you disc, tear, dead shape, cultivate. There's no weeding. Great. Nobody likes weeding. And there's no row cover, which is probably my least favorite thing about farming. It's easy to implement, with the sort of exception of this no-till transplant, which I'm still working out, but like, most of this equipment, it's not crazy. It needs to be tweaked. And the planning's really easy. So like, and easy to bail out. Those are sort of related. So I can cover my whole field in clover, and then I can come up with my winter plan. This became really relevant during COVID because my markets were just like, I'm sure everybody in here, they're like, I need more of this, less of that, like more direct retail sales, more wholesale. It was just like, I couldn't really do my normal planning over winter. It was like it was like such a moving target. It's like, oh, if I have this covered in clover, right up to when things get seeded in the greenhouse, I could make a call about how much of it I want to plow down and grow in a tilled situation because it's going to be like storage carrots or onions, and how much I want to keep in clover for that kind of crop. So again, like talk about night and day between this and rye, for example, where you're like, I'm not going to grow any more early carrots than I had planned for because I'm not going to be able to get that rye terminated at the time. This is like the exact opposite, where you're like, right up until the edge, you can just make a sort of choice. Next slide, please. So it doesn't work for a lot of crops. Like there's clover competition. This is not a panacea. It's really cool. I think it's great. This is just one solution of many solutions that we need. But the clover provides all this competition. This is sweet peppers with like, I didn't put the date on here. Whatever it is embarrassingly late. We're at 11 inches and like, that's what your fruit is like. Does not work. Maybe because the soil was shaded. Like I said, there actually is a study that had great results with sweet peppers from Italy, I want to say. I know the author is Biazzi, so now I'm just being like, it was Italy. It was not in the US. So it could be this soil shading thing. And then there's yield reduction on a lot of crops. Like I think there's some yield reduction on the tomatoes, for example. And it requires some equipment. The difference between these two things being like some stuff I don't think it works for. Some stuff I'd be like, yeah, it works, but there's some amount of yield reduction. And it requires some equipment modification and experimentation and investment to scale. Do the next one. Cool. So for me, this hits the things that I was looking for, which is it's increasing carbon in the soil, it's decreasing carbon that's going up, it's increasing biodiversity, it's scalable. When I look at it, I think, yeah, this could be on a couple hundred acres. And it's practical. Let's see what's next. But, right, so I don't know any of these things. I don't know anything about it, actually. Yeah.
Question. First of all, which animals are you running like in
I'm not grazing the clover. Was that your question?
yeah.
You could. I'm just given my soil and whatever, like, I don't really need a bunch of animals tugging, like, it can get sloppy pretty quickly. So I would rather mow than, but if I was doing this on larger acreages, especially with better drained soil, I would definitely be like, oh, my storage cabbage, which isn't gonna go in until, middle, late June, would be perfect to graze in May or early June. So I think animal integration is an exciting piece of this system. I have not really done it. And I also just practically sort of on the farm, I'm moving more towards vegetables and less animals over the year. So I'm not like hurting for grazing. Do you have more?
I fell with.
You can go.
Okay. I guess, so it's whatever the earthquake, does it not get tangled?
It doesn't, because what's on that transplanter, and what time is it?
10:05.
We go till 10:30.
You go till 10:30, yes.
You want to come to my afternoon thing? I think I have a bunch more about the transplanter there, but suffice to say, there's a sharp, straight coulter on front. That's like your pizza cutter. Then I have a ripper tooth that's deep, like 6 inches deep, right behind that. And then the transplanting shoe like follows in that wake. So you've really moved some material out of that slot. And you don't need a transplant. You can use stuff that's already on a tractor cultivating. Like I think we'll probably have the stuff around. And I did this really early on with horse stuff. A different set of experiments, but it's the same thing. You just throw a coulter and a tooth on literally anything, following each other nicely. That's the key, is like to make sure they are perfectly lined up. You'll make a nice slot for yourself that's like real easy to get a seed into. Yes.
My question was sort of related. I was going to ask about hand transplanting, but I guess you would do that and then go.
No, again, I'm going to get into it, but the basic thing that when we started these experiments, we had a ball logger, which is like a giant drill bit. If you were going to put tulips in your backyard or whatever, you buy them, it's like $15. It goes on a cordless drill. You make a hole in the clover, you just put the transplant in.
So you don't have a trench, you just do.
There's no
right
point.
into it.
There's no point if you're going to be like under 500 transplants, let's say. There's really no point in modifying, even if you already own a transplanter, there's no point in modifying it, because at that point you're just kind of an experimental scale, seeing if this works. And this is like very pleasant. It's just that it takes long enough that if you're like, well, now I'm going to try to put in a couple acres, but I'm not doing that. For one thing, I would need 400 batteries, which would be cool. More batteries is always a good thing.
You know the like bacteria versus fungal loving food crops, and how clovers is making a bunch of nitrogen with bacteria. that's why cabbage does really well. So I remember that being a bacteria loving, where it's like peppers, I think, or maybe like a little more fungus.
It's a really interesting question, and Ruben, who's speaking right now about microscopy, did a sample for me, and we're going to try to watch those dynamics over the next couple of years. It's totally possible.
I feel like you could optimize that, find that out.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's exciting about this through more research would be like, all right, there's year 2 clover, there's year 1 when you get established, right? There's year 2 clover. What is that? What's happening in the soil at that point?
Yeah.
Year 3 clover, year 4 clover, year 5 clover. I assume the dynamics in the soil are really changing, probably from bacterial to fungal,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Makes intuitive sense, but I have no actual data to back that up. And so you might find that there's family rotations that really work from year to year. Maybe that's one of these unanswered questions. Yeah.
Do you use any mycorrhizal amendments or any mycelium?
I do like the really lazy KNF. It's like, I'll tell you what it is, but I'm not recommending this. This is what I do. I find a pretty spot in the pasture, and I dig up like a clump of roots, and I bang that into a bucket, and then I find a beautiful tree, and I take a scoop of soil from underneath that, and I put that in the bucket, and then I fill that with water and slosh it around and let it sit for 20 minutes, and I pour that into like a soak that my transplants go into for like 30 seconds before they get put on the trailer and go up to the field. Might do nothing. Maybe it's amazing. I don't know.
Something.
Yeah, but
I use a seaweed, and I pre-salt my seeds with that seaweed solution we get from Harvest. Can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I have a lot of success with that.
I mean, you can find some studies on this stuff, and you can find products like all day long. For me, a lot of this, like my interest in scalability, in soil, in systems, is about moving away from input and product and moving towards an ecosystem thinking that's like, if I don't have what I want in my soil, I don't want to feed that to my crop. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. I am doing this little bit that I am doing, but my feeling is like, why isn't that in my field? I just want it in the freaking field. I don't want to be like solving a problem every year. I want to set up a system that is healthy and functioning, that doesn't need me to like try to like micromanage like one fucking species that I've like read about online versus like everybody, like there's 6 billion organisms living in every handful. Like, who am I to know anything about that except at the sort of broadest level to be like, let's see if we can get like more good stuff through broad scale management techniques. So that's really where all this comes from for me, I guess. But yeah, okay, so these are other things that I don't know. There's a varietal thing that's really interesting. I did 2 kinds of Colby's, just a random example. I had nor'easter and rattlesnake. Nor'easter didn't do well, rattlesnake did. You're like, damn, this is a whole process of rediscovery that I've already done for all the varieties. When you flip them through the catalog, I know which ones I like now. I'll play with a couple new ones every year, but you know, you have your like go-tos. Clover is just a different system. There's gonna be different things that do or don't do well. I was like, oh, maybe heirlooms will do better. But like that hasn't actually panned out. There's plenty of more modern F1s that do well in that system. Jury's out, don't know, can't tell you. Moisture dynamics are interesting. It seems to need more water at establishment because the clover's thirst is like winning, right? So even if you have decent soil moisture in June at transplant time, it's nice to have like ideal saturation. Whereas in July, I find it needs less water than my tilled spots because the clover is not growing super aggressively and it's shading the soil. So there's not that much transpiration and there's very little evaporation. So this is something we're going to study this year with this SARE grant. Is like, what does it look like over the course of the season? And yeah, when is there most water demand versus versus tilled crops? Soil type, You know, I have 2 types that I work with on my farm, and so part of what is like I'll never be able to answer until there's more trials. It's like, how does this do somewhere else? So many trials to run. Let's see what's next. Oh, okay. That's nearly my last slide. So yeah, that led me, okay, so that all led me, like, I've been giving these talks mostly about clover. This one has this broader lens, but a lot of it's just like clover, clover, clover. And people come up afterwards, they're like, this is really cool. And I'm like, you should try it. And they're like, no, why don't you know, get back in touch with me when it like works, when you have like a system. And it's like becomes a chicken egg, which is like, I can't tell, like until somebody runs trials, I don't know. I'll never be able to say more than what I can say now, which is like, it works for me on my farm, with my system, with my equipment, with my market, with these crops that I happen to grow. And it's like so specific. And the last thing I would ever tell somebody is like, yeah, go put in 10 acres of perennial clover next year and try not to go broke. So I was complaining about this to a friend of mine who's like a tech entrepreneur, who was like, oh, you just need to pay people to do trials. And I was like, that's not how that, like, I don't even use NRCS, but have to, I don't even. And he was like, no, it's just a great thing, like kind of frame it like climate wise and then go raise money for this. I was like, all right. So anyway, long story short, he like makes it sound so easy. And he was like, yeah, you can totally start a nonprofit, I'm gonna help you. So me and him, so he's really like holding my hand as I, you know, I think most of us just operate in a world where you're like, and most even farming nonprofit, like, you know, agricultural nonprofits, still like shoestring stuff. And, you know, his feeling, and he could be wrong, but I'm really hoping he's right, is that there's money out there for climate adaptation type stuff to run these trials. And actually he is, so far, I've raised some money and it's going well. So I think it's gonna be called Farm Web. But I'm open to many other ideas. But the idea was like, all right, how do we pay? Yes, the problem is people can't afford to do these trials. They shouldn't be able to afford to do these trials because it's actually a public service that people are providing when they do this. Like, it's hopefully good for their farm, but mostly, if it works, whatever information they have is like broadly useful to society, right? We should be paying for this. And NRCS actually has all this money. They're difficult to access because they underfund NRCS. Like staffing is so underfunded. But the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, just added, basically doubled direct NRCS payments to farmers between 2023 and 2026. Anybody who's thinking about getting NRCS money, like in Massachusetts, they are trying to give it away. You just don't have enough staff to give it away. It's like worth calling your office and being like, I would like money. What can I get? And like it is their job and it's their like responsibility to give this money away. They're actually stressed out about how to give this money away. Is there any NRCS people? So not in an embarrassed way, in a way that they'd be like, so here's how the nonprofit works. We're setting up teams. The first one's in Massachusetts next year, but I have one in development in New Jersey, one in Wisconsin, one in Pennsylvania, one in Hudson Valley, and one in Central Vermont. So we're hoping to just keep going with it. And there's like a crew of farmers who are on a team. So there's like 15 of them. They have a coordinator who helps with technical assistance and does data collection. Because I know I don't do data collection during the season. It's not like a thing that can happen. And the concept here is of coordinated trials. So like I'm part of all these no-till groups. You get together and it's like, I'm trying this, I'm trying that. It's all interesting, but we're not really building on each other's work very much, or certainly not in like a, you know, concentrated, focused way. So the idea here is like, okay, you tell us about your farm or whatever. We pick trials, we pick crops, we pick whatever based on like how we can build this information together so that the information we get is useful to the individual farmers on that team, but it's also something I can be here in a couple of years talking to you guys and be like, you know what variety of tomato works great? This one. You know what the ideal plant transplant size is? That. You know how much water it's going to need? This much. These are the kinds of questions we want to be able to answer. And the nonprofit itself, what's cool once those get set up is it doesn't just need to be Clover. It can be any of these systems that we're talking about, like what are the new systems? So like you can pick up something innovative that somebody's doing and being like, you know, be like, great, let's trial this and get some good data on it. So anyway, my email as far as that nonprofit thing goes at the moment. Can you click off that Zoom thing?
Yeah, we're just trying to, I'm sorry, we're trying to log back into the meeting. It kicked us out.
Oh.
So we just got our hands on the password and he's gonna
Oh,
enter it
no
right
problem.
now.
Well, this just says @gmail.com. So it's PCS, perennial clover system, farm partner @gmail. It'll get more official, yeah.
And could you also go through like UMass?
I am working with UMass, yeah.
Just minimize it.
Yeah, I have a SARE grant next year with UMass and American Farmland Trust to look at labor and yield in this system. So I'm working with somebody in their soil science thing. You know, for me, again, like they're not oriented towards like, let's find the fucking answers and like get this implemented. They're like, this is interesting, that's interesting, and it is all interesting, but you can tell I just want to like find out. I want to get it on farms. So yeah, I feel like we don't have that much time. Like I'm not sure what exactly we're waiting for. This is the 2-minute drill, you know. This isn't like we don't have time to like. This isn't. Yeah.
But there must be more money in that Inflation Reduction Act for colleges, universities too, right? Universities.
They'll get plenty of that money. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's so much. There's so much cool stuff going on right now. Like American Farmland Trust has an amazing, kind of similar to what I'm talking about, like cover crop challenges. They have all these farms nationally basically asking the question, if we've known how great cover crops are, we've been trying to push money towards farmers adopting them since the 1970s, why are only 5% of US farmland acres cover crop each year? It's the kind of thing you think NRCS would be like, so there is a problem, obviously, right? We've been telling people to do it forever. Everybody knows it's a good idea. There's like massive amounts of research behind it and no one's doing it. So like, why not? So let's ask farmers, like so that's what's cool about this AFT study. And there's plenty of other stuff like it, which is just really on a practical level. Like what are the actual barriers to adoption?
Cost and fear of failure.
Yeah.
You know, even for the big conventions.
Especially, you know, my privilege is that I'm on like 5 acres on a farm with a paid mortgage. And if I want to play with a 1/4 acre,
Start small.
I get retail dollars. Yeah. I mean, if I'm commodity corn and my profit is $40 an acre, like I'm not trying to figure out. And if I'm in debt in the spring and I like manage to, you know, pay my leases off in the fall. So, you know, and that's true for a lot of farmers in Massachusetts too. It's not just, I'm not just saying, I'm saying that's my actual privilege. I'm on a mortgage-free farm.
See, I understand what you mean, because all the commodity farmers that get all the subsidies to the farm bill, they need to follow the process, so they don't get the subsidies or the insurance.
Right.
So they're kind of locked in.
Yeah.
But hopefully with incentives, that's what I'm hoping with this new farm bill.
Right.
That would help us scale up.
Yeah. And there's a lot of money. There's already $300 million a year going to pay for cover cropping through NRCS. So it's not like it doesn't exist, but again, sort of being like, let's just step back and ask, like, okay, what pieces of what's missing so that people do it? Yeah. Let's see what's on that next. That's it. Oh, we're back to sort of the beginning. Yeah, we're back to the same questions. I just went through that whole thing. I still have all the same questions I had. And that's kind of how it is, you know? Can we do it? Yeah. So at this point, I don't know, what do we have, 10 minutes?
Yeah, so you have about till 10:30. The next presentation starts at 11. So we
Okay,
figure they'll need a little time to get in here and get set up. But if you go a few minutes over 10:30.
Yeah, I'm happy to do questions, comments, thoughts.
Have you experimented with any other type of crops?
I haven't. With any as a living mulch, you mean? I haven't. I've really kind of racked my brain. One thing that I don't like about this system is it's a monoculture in its way. But when you start to wonder, like, all right, what else is there that's perennial, is aggressive enough to stop weeds, but not so aggressive that it's going to run over your crop? I sort of run out of ideas. There's some things I see, like there's some native stuff that I see. I don't know how you even get the seed for. First, but trefoil was something I was going to play with, and then as I was looking at, I just have like a little bit in my field. It's got a much more open habit. There's a lot more light penetration to the soil surface. I think you get a bunch more weeds, and it's tall. But a mix, like, you know, maybe.
Would you, have you considered like annuals? Is there anything about like annual crops that you're against, or obviously it's good? For certain particular crops?
Me, I'm not against annual cover crops at all. I
Right,
love annual
exactly,
cover
yeah.
crops in this system. Yeah, I don't know, maybe you weren't here at the beginning, but it's kind of like, it's a lot for me to plan.
Right.
It's got to get established, usually through tillage. You got to hope that it germinates well, and you get a good stand, you don't have a ton of weeds in it. You got to hope that you get a good kill on it, or that it comes back well, or whatever. There's a lot of like season to season variations. And I think part of what I'm feeling on my farm climate-wise is like, that is increasingly variable, like how all those things are going to line up. And you're asking a lot of things to line up well so you can, you know, get a successful crop there. The other thing I'll say is, like, I think, can you go to the next slide? No, shoot, again, it doesn't matter. I've come to feel like perennials are the solution for no-till, like incorporating perennials in one way or the other. So what I like about transferred mulch, for example, even though, as I said, I don't think it's super scalable, you're asking a perennial thing, in my case, just pasture, nativized pasture, to like is already doing all the work. It's holding the soil in place. It's providing like multi-year habitat for soil dwelling things and for above ground things. And that like becomes the anchor for your system. So you got your annual cash crop over here, but like you're really like what holds your system down is this perennial pasture. In clover, what holds your system down is that perennial clover. And so I feel like those perennials are giving you the long-term stability that you want to see in your system. And at the same time, removing a lot of the like intensity of all the moving pieces that are inherent in an annual system. I would even say like tarps in a weird way are sort of perennial. Like it becomes this this solution that that is like you can count on it. It just exists, and you can put it in the place that you want it to be in. I mean, obviously, it doesn't have any of the other benefits of the perennial, of the natural perennial. But again, like these are the like developing systems where we're trying to use perenniality as like a baseline that we can like count on as we then deal with like start dealing with like just the regular shit that comes your way as we're trying to grow a thing that you can sell. Yeah.
Do you think you need to use drip to make this work, or should you overrun that part?
That was, do you need to use drip or could you overhead water was the question. That is something I'm thinking a lot about because I hate drip tape. I've eliminated plastic otherwise in the clover system. Pulling the drip tape up sucks. You guys all know about drip tape, so I don't love drip tape. It's super efficient, so I think I don't know what matters more. Like it's one of those like damn if you do, damn if you don't. I don't think overhead, like I don't have a huge problem, especially in this system with overhead in terms of disease though. Like one of the interesting things I found, I grew summer squash in this system, one planting made it through my entire season, which for me on black plastic or on tarp system is 3 successions to get me through the year. It didn't yield nearly as much. I was getting like 2 fruits a week off of each plant probably, but they just kept going. Again, I think you get enough biodiversity going and you start to have like positive interactions. You don't have soil splash. There's a lot of stuff that's not happening that would happen in a more normal system. So I wouldn't be like, yes, do it over it. But I, off the bat, am very curious for myself, and I can't see any downsides.
Do you ever get the clover shellfish?
Clover, harboring pests, particularly voles, is the question. No, I haven't had voles. I'm not confident to say that, like, I've had real problems with that in the transfer mulch, like big problems in the transfer mulch.
After this, I don't know.
I don't know why though, and I'm not, I feel like I'm hesitant because I feel like next year could be a year where I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of
For the next
strikes me as
session.
like sort of natural problem that that system should have. I just haven't had that problem yet. Slugs is the one
This room has like a
pest
different
that I deal
host
with
list for
in
the
that
next
system.
session. I don't know.
And
Whatever it is. Unless she
so
changed
like
it.
on my cabbage,
I was just looking
it
at it.
wasn't any marketable damage. Like, I think it was fine, but they were there, and now like I'm wholesaling them now. I'm just in there cleaning them for longer because I have to take off like extra wrappers to make
I
sure.
have these right here, so.
So I'm like actually down to where it looks good.
About ducks or it's just slugs?
104.
I have.
Someone else.
All right, that must have been updated.
Yeah, well, this is just one
So
of
you're
those
gonna
things
head
again,
here,
because I'm
or
like,
you walk
because I'm sort of shopping that I'm like, I am at this
Probably
point, I
go
feel like I'm a
to
demo
my
farm
mom's one.
for someone to pick this up. The last thing I want to do is be like, then if you
Just
get
to see.
$25 per acre, it's like, all right. But absolutely on my farm, at my scale, that would totally be a solution. Chickens are great too if you rotate them through. I stopped doing that a while ago because it's just a labor nightmare, but they did great producing slug pressure too. I had lettuce that looked good, which I never thought was going to work. I just threw it in as an experiment, but the lettuce looked good. Grew up through, like, competed nicely with the clover, which just really shocked me. And because it had been in the shade, was like delicious and tender in July, which is cool, and was not a single marketable head in the slug hedge. Like, they weren't destroyed, but there was no point in trying to sell them. So that was like the one that I lost. Aside from that, yeah, there was less hornworm.
Okay.
I don't think I had any tomato hornworms in there.
That's why I put
Why did you come to the decision to reset? Did you say after 4 or 5 years, kind of reset the space?
Yeah, at some point, so like you'll see, even in the first year, there's some perennial grasses that get a foothold in there that you wouldn't notice if you were gonna disc it down.
Mhm.
And then in year 2, like that clump spreads a little. And at some point, in my limited experience, it really feels like it's one year to the next. You're like, this is clover with some perennial things growing in it. And then all of a sudden you're like, this looks like pasture with a lot of clover in it. And I don't think I should try to grow anything. We do hemp. And so the final year for us has been such an aggressive crop. The final year, we're like, that kind of looks like shit, but I bet hemp's gonna do fine. And we're gonna have to hit reset after that.
So the next presenter is outside.
Cool.
So if you want.
You
to take
guys,
one or two.
Can I ask one last
Yeah,
thing?
I was gonna say, do you want to wrap up shortly?
I just typed this up last night. I don't love it, but in order to apply for some grants and talk to private foundations and stuff, I'm just trying to gather signatures that are like, I like the idea of this nonprofit. And there's also a column here if you would like to participate in trials, but I would appreciate, nobody needs to do this, but I would appreciate gathering signatures. It just means something when I go talk to somebody to be like, and I have 100 farmers who said, this sounds like a good idea. So if anybody's willing to do that, I will put a couple of these around. I'll put them here.